The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
So, yay, we as Tennesseans, now there are lots of really great Tennessee stories where you can talk about, well, this happened in Tennessee, and connect it to the larger national story. So this is a really great way to do like local history tied to larger national movements. And so this is where Tennessee gets to be, hey, we provided the last vote that was needed in order to ratify this amendment to the Constitution. So you're welcome. Okay, so this starts off by establishing some context of what's going on in Tennessee as far as the women's suffrage movement. And this building down here is the Hermitage Hotel, which is in Nashville. And do you know anything about the Hermitage Hotel?
Isn't that someone right across from the Tennessee Performing Arts? Right? Or like diagonal?
Yeah, it's like right downtown, close to TPAC, close to the state capitol building.
It's very fancy.
It's very, very fancy and expensive. But if you ever go in, apparently, I don't know about the men's bathroom, but the women's bathroom is very pretty. So at least go in the lobby and go see the women's bathroom, right?
Yeah, the men's is too.
Huh?
The men's is too.
Thanks, Mitch.
That's all I call it in.
No. It was built between 1908 and 1910, so it still would have been relatively new during the women's suffrage movement, and it's a very grand building. A very accomplished architect designed it, and there were lots of political gatherings that occurred here. And so the most significant one was in 1920, when supporters and opponents of women's suffrage both used the hotel as a headquarters for their campaign to sway the votes of state legislators. So imagine that, they were both headquartered in the same fancy hotel. I wonder what the
elevator talk.
Yeah, the awkward elevator talk was like there. Okay. So it's nice to be able to kind of connect it to an actual space, and you could go into Google Maps and show your students, what it looks like today. And these, by the way, all have entries. They're linked to through the lesson idea. Entries on the Tennessee Encyclopedia of History and Culture. Has anyone used that resource for your teaching? Yeah. This is an online encyclopedia of anything that has to do with Tennessee history and culture. Anything from, the Civil War to Graceland to Justin Timberlake, So it's a really, really great place to go. Check it out before you go to Wikipedia. It's written by different scholars from across the state. So the person who wrote the Hermitage Hotel entry, for example, is my boss, Carol Van West, the Tennessee State Historian and Director of the MTSU Center for Historic Preservation. And the other two articles on Josephine Pearson and Ann Dallas Dudley were written by Carol Busey, who is a professor at Volunteer State Community College up in Gallatin. She's really great. So remember that we learned a little bit about these two ladies at the beginning during the icebreaker session. Did anybody remember who Josephine Pearson was and who Ann Dallas Dudley was?
I think Josephine was against the.
Yeah. So that's right. Josephine Pearson was leader of the anti-suffrage movement in Tennessee. Now, she was born in Gallatin, but she grew up in McMinnville. and she went to Irving College, and then she got a master's degree from Cumberland College in 1896. She's extremely well educated for a woman at the turn of the century. All right, so this is not just some ignorant woman from the country who doesn't know what she's talking about. She definitely knows what she's talking about. And she was also on the women's board of the Tennessee Centennial Exposition, which was the huge 1897 celebration where the Parthenon was built for it, et cetera, et cetera. She also participated in the Dixie Highway Council, and the Dixie Highway was like the most important road built before the era of interstates. It went all the way from Miami to Chicago, and there's several segments that still go through Tennessee. It goes right through Murfreesboro. So it took a lot of organization to get that thing paid for. Okay, so when Governor Albert Roberts called a special session of the Tennessee General Assembly to ratify the amendment in 1920, Pearson came to Nashville and worked actively during July and August to defeat the amendment. And so she was one of the people who was camped out in the Hermitage Hotel. Okay, and so when she lost that fight, she became dean of the Southern Seminary of Virginia, where she also taught history and philosophy. She's buried in Monteagle. So an accomplished woman, but I guess you could say on the wrong side of history. You know, we can say that now, but it's important for students to recognize that she wasn't doing this because she hated, women's rights. A lot of women were against women's suffrage because they thought it actually would drag women into a sphere that would negatively affect their standing in society. It would take away some of their moral authority, becoming, from being home, from their place in the home as a really high kind of moral position.
That kind of leads me to a question real quick. Right now, fourth graders in our district, we are learning about suffrages and the movement, okay? The book that we are reading is entitled The Hope Checks. In the book, the women who are against the movement are those women who say they should be in the home taking care of the family, the husband and the children. Now, Miss Pearson doesn't sound like that kind of woman. So why was she against the suffragist movement?
Well, that is a really good question, and it's not gone into in this very short article. So you would want to do some research because I think that's key.
Supposedly part of it was that she promised her mother on her mother's deathbed that her mother was opposed to it. And that she promised her mother that she would.
Well, this is a whole lesson about listening to your mother, isn't it? Okay.
Wow.
There's a really great book, it was published about a year ago. It's called The Woman's Hour. It's about just the last 6 weeks of the suffrage movement in Tennessee through that.
Oh, we'll have to check that out.
And I'm about halfway through it.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic.
All right, well, you're doing your research on that, right?
Well, I did.
Okay.
I did. I finished my master's and I did the women's suffrage movement.
Oh, very cool, very cool. It's not really my background in terms of history, but doing TPS, I've just learned so much about every single era of history. It's really great. I'm a medievalist, but yeah, anyway. So, and Anne Dallas Dudley, what do we remember about her? She was pro-women's suffrage. She was president of the Tennessee Suffrage Association. She is from Nashville. She was one of these elite, from an elite family, also well educated. She was part of the NAWSA, so Nassau, and her children actually were in the suffrage parades with her, and there's a picture of her reading to her kids because one of the things that people would say against suffragists to use against them was this, they are throwing away their roles as wives and mothers. But then you have like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and in the 19th century, and Anne Dallas Dudley, being photographed as wives and mothers to be like, no, you can be proper wives and mothers and be for women's suffrage. So that was an important image to get across. And she had a lot more political involvement later in life. She's buried in Mount Olivet in Nashville. Okay, so these two women, Tennessee figures on each side of the aisle here, kind of clashing at the Hermitage Hotel. This is the context in which we're going to learn about Harry Byrne. And Harry Byrne was a very, very young, brand new Tennessee legislator. And of course, one of his first things he has to do is vote on one of the most important things of his time. And I am going to pass out to you, first of all, this original letter is in Knoxville with his papers. It's Byrne, Henry Byrne, the McClung collection. So I want you to take a look. You don't have to read off of the original, but I always like to show students what these actually look like. Whether they can read it or not, they need to kind of see what it is, where it is that we get our primary source information from. And I'm going to pass out to you a transcript of the excerpt that we will be concentrating on today. Would somebody like to read it out loud?
I wish you were home too. We have had nothing but rain since you left. Meeting still in progress. I haven't been a single time. Uncle Bill and Mr. Bushnell came over this PM. Stayed about an hour. They were in the Ford. We haven't had the car out since you left. And if this rainy weather doesn't let up, I fear we will have to stay at home the rest of the summer. The Rockwood crowd is going to the White Cliff Labor Day. Will you be home by then? Hurrah and vote for suffrage, and do not keep them in doubt. I noticed Chandler's speech. It was very bitter. I've been wanting to see how you stood, but have not seen anything yet. Write Mother every time you have a chance, for I am always looking for a letter when you are away. Don't forget to be a good boy and help Mrs. Thomas Cat with her rats. Is she the one that put rat in ratification? No more from Mama this time. With lots of love, Mom.
What do you say? What do you think the tone of this letter is?
Don't let me down.
It was lighthearted, but she was strategic too.
Okay, so you see her as being strategic,
Yes.
the way that moms certainly know how to manipulate their kids. Yes, it is.
I think she's playing off of their relationship, like, I know you're working on all of this where you are, but remember this relationship that we have, because sometimes you could probably forget, but she's like bringing them back home, she's setting them up with what's going on, and don't forget.
And that's how she got him.
That's
how she got him.
Because if you don't vote for women, so.
You'll never get to ride in the Ford.
All of your days will be right.
Yes.
I know this looks like it's just an excerpt, but it doesn't seem like she's pounding it in him. She's kind of talking about it, and just throws it in there.
Yep. The weather, the relatives, etc., etc. Now, what is she talking about with Chandler's speech? That's not something that I know a lot about. But I assume it was a politician speaking out either before or against this. So that might be something to have your students look into. Also, who is this Mrs. Thomas Cat person? And why? What's the rats vote? I mean, what's the rats joke there? You know, from the context, you can kind of guess that this is a woman fighting for her rights to vote. And so don't forget to be a good boy. And good height. And she couches it as kind of a funny little thing. But yeah, and she's certainly kind of milking the mother-son relationship, like you said. This is not a woman who has a political request from a politician. It's a lot easier to refuse a female constituent than it is yo mama. Right. With lots of love, mama.
Questions?
Yeah.
Okay, clearly she wants, okay, she has a way of getting a vote that she wants. She's trying to influence her son. Okay, there's something she wants. Her son has the power to vote for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so she writes a kind of lovely mother-son note, just throwing it in here and there. Why do you think Abigail wrote such a stern letter to her own husband? Her letter, I mean, that's a conversation she could have had at home, but she chose to write him a letter.
Well, he wasn't at home for a long time. She was in Braintree, Massachusetts, running the farm while he was off fighting, founding the country.
So why do you think it was so stern then?
I don't think it was stern. I think that they wrote to each other very much as friends and equals. And I think that that's why I kind of hinted that she's a little bit like, remember the ladies, John? Kind of, this might be something that she had already talked to him about and is just kind of gently reminding him. But it's, I guess I'm basing my idea of what their relationship was like on the HBO miniseries John Adams because it's so good and Laura Linney does such a great job. But I don't think it was meant to be stern. I think it was meant to be loving, but this was just the way that they talked to each other. And I think it was more like a gentle chiding, but I am serious at the same time. And so again, like, how is it that women have to couch their requests to get men to do what they want? And so it's kind of the theme for the day. How do you use what people have already agreed on to kind of get what you want? So
I would kind of compare it to the relationship that I perceive between the Obamas. I mean, I feel like Michelle Obama, he really talks to her and that they have a positive marriage, but they also share a lot of that political decision making, similar to the Adams.
Okay, so yeah, Michelle and Barack Obama seem like they treat each other as equals and as confidants and that they get advice from each other, which, there's always a different president, first lady dynamic. Now, you don't have to read the words on this. I actually blew it up a little bit bigger, but this has this nice little picture I wanted to make sure that you guys got. This is a newspaper. Now, I tried so hard, guys, to make this easy to read. When you are looking at the website, you can zoom in and read these newspaper articles much more easily. So we know what happened. He voted for it. Tennessee got enough votes to be the state needed to ratify it. And then later that year, this article is released. So I'm going to give you some time to read it. Now, what I love about the letter and this newspaper article, well, one of the many things, is that it's at the kind of reading level that fifth graders might be able to handle, unlike previous newspaper article. So this is something that can really be used, and the lesson, the curriculum standard is, of course, 540, and of course it can also be used in high school. Okay, so there are some suggested questions that you could pose to your students after they read these two. So one, what reasoning did Harry Byrne give for supporting suffrage? How did his mother react to his vote? What political repercussions did he suffer because of his vote? And how might his political standing have changed once women could vote? And then it suggests that you have students do a skit and act out all the parts. One of our graduate students did this because I never think of skits. and I'm doing lessons. So keeping some of those questions in mind and maybe asking some of your own, let me know how it is that you find this newspaper article. Like, what tone is it? What kind of bias do you think it may or may not have? What is the reason Harry gives? What's the reason that his mom gives for Harry? What kind of clues did you pick up about their background that might make this make sense or be surprising? Reactions.
My girlfriend.
And we didn't find that out to the very end, did we? Okay, so not only does his mom, is his mom a longtime suffragist, his fiance is a suffragist, but that's not the reason that he gives for why he voted. What does he say?
Women are people too.
Conscience.
Women are people
I feel like how the
too.
journalist worded it would make other men be like, oh, he's like being swayed by women in his life. So like the people that aren't thinking how he's thinking, they'd be like more mad.
Oh yeah, the way absolutely is in all caps. I mean, it seems to me like this journalist was like, oh, well now I finally have a reason that I can believe.
Right.
So I'm gonna have it at the end as a zinger.
Like it's like, oh, he just did this because his mom and girlfriend. So really, I mean, not much of a, it's like pretty much like saying, how much of a man or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, how much of a man is he when his mom does all the talking, right?
He doesn't really talk in all that.
Boy,
The
you have a
journalist
lot.
definitely was biased.
Yeah, that was a smart tactic by the journalist to add in like a sentence that he said and then all of the interview with the mom, because I'm sure he said much more, but he was smart in, choosing to use the mother's words over.
And you can ask your kids to like do this from the point of view of a journalist that like believed that it was right what he did. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, instead of
Right.
like yeah.
Right, how would they rewrite it? Yeah.
I guess I interpreted it exactly opposite.
Okay.
She is absolutely a suffragist. Like, this is how he won her over in the end. Like, wow, this woman's like, man, this is the guy who gives us this amendment. I want to be with him, because this article was written by Zoe Beckley. So, probably a woman who wrote it.
That's a really good detail.
I just noticed that at the beginning too. But it was a woman, but is Zoe a girl name or boy name at that time?
Well, nowadays it's a girl name, but it's really hard to tell. A lot of girl names used to be boy names.
Right.
And once you go girl, you never go back, apparently. But so that's interesting. Maybe she's his fiance because he supported. Maybe that's how they got together in the first place.
But here's what I found interesting.
Yes.
Mom said that she only encouraged him to vote yes because she knew he already would. Well, if you knew that, why would you feel the need to encourage him? So I don't know if
Spoken like this sounds like a mom to me. Oh yeah. Oh, I was just nudging him to do what I knew he would have done anyway. Yeah. Yes, Mary.
Well, and I picked up how much he and his mom read.
Yes.
Which means they
Yes.
beyond the little world in Tennessee where they
Right. Well, they're from a little farm. He hasn't even gone to college. The father is just mentioned as he's dead. And so the mother is obviously dominating the lives of these kids. But even though they're farmers in like McMinnville or something, sorry, McMinnville, they're really well read. They're really well read. And the fact that that was pointed out specifically by the journalist with exclamation point.
I thought it was like the part about the mom's fault if the child is ignorant. It's like the mom believes that she is like wanting him to choose like women's rights, but then it's like you're putting your child's ignorance solely on yourself. Like if they turn out.
Well, it's always the mom's fault, no matter what. Yeah, I think that's a backhanded way for taking credit for the fact that he's not ignorant.
But then again, maybe she felt that way because her husband was deceased.
and you don't know how
That was
long.
already.
Yeah, we don't know how much she raised them by herself, or
It said in the end that she'd been like doing the cattle and the cleaning and the.
Yes, they
Oh, and their pigs have very clean.
Mother Byrne, born the suffragists.
So what is some of the backlash that Harry Byrne has gotten?
He's going to the suburbs.
I'm sorry?
You're right, he's going to the suburbs with his fiance.
Oh, yeah, he's not going to stay in the big city.
Just something that would be interesting to know and students could look up is, was he reelected after he did this?
Yes, that's a good question. He sounds like he's ready to like quit the political sphere and go start a business. But yeah, what did he do? Because he's very young, you know? He has his whole life ahead of him, and I don't even know how long that he lived.
And whether he wants to or not, Mom is kind of helping with that decision also. Politics is just a horrible mess. You don't need that anymore. Come on.
Right. Right.
We're doing all this at home, you need to come back to us. Yeah. It's like,
Well, think about it. When he goes up for re-election, there'll be a whole bunch of women who could vote for him. So that could be in his favor.
But the attacks probably coming from the guys in the house.
And also the fact that he's withstanding these political attacks, I mean, it might actually reflect well on his character. That, you know, he did this even though he knew that he was not going to be received very well by a lot of people. But, you know, this is the thing. When do you do what you know is right, even though you know that you're going to be raked over the coals for it? Of course, I think if he hadn't done it, he would have been raked over the coals even worse by his mother. But they are pals. I love that. They are pals. So this journalist was obviously very charmed by their little family situation and thought that this would make a good story. And it certainly does make a good story, which is why it might be a fun thing to do a skit on. So yes. What other, like, what is up with that limerick at the beginning? Why are you putting that into a newspaper article? Anyway, do you all know where Nyota is? It's not McMinnville, I'm sorry. He's from Nyota. It's a really small town in East Tennessee. But I mean, it does point out that this was a surprise vote. And that's even mentioned later on where the vote was, you know, he switched it to 49 to 47. So he probably was going to vote the other way, or at least let out that he was going to vote the other way. And then at the last minute, so that kind of makes you believe that maybe his mother's letter was a little bit of a nudge, or at least helped embolden him to follow his conscience, because we know how hard that can be. Now, other details in here, she does mention Mrs. Cat again. So does this make more sense of what the rats, what are the rats? She's like, maybe I shouldn't have used slang. So, but why did she make that mention about Mrs. Cat?
She wants her to get ratification. Yeah. She wants her to be like pushed over the edge.
Yeah. She sees her part in this as kind of giving credit to Mrs. Cat, and also she knew that it would be something that Harry would respond to.
Question. I kept trying to put Miss Cat into something that we've heard about already.
Well, there's Carrie Chapman Cat, and I don't know if this is, I thought she was from before.
No, it's the
same
she
one?
was involved for a while. Her
Okay.
husband died, and then she got into it afterwards.
Okay, so this is Carrie Chapman Cat. There we go. I was just getting my timeline a little bit confused.
So the rat, and she was throwing, she figured he would get the message.
Yes.
That's what she was saying. She figured he would get it, he would understand
Yes.
what she was saying with the rat and the ratification.
So this story obviously has made its way to the national stage, and it's also become a personal interest kind of story, you could say, a mother and a son story. So it is. This is for West Virginia people who might be able to recognize the farm life aspect of it, and certainly the mother-son aspect of it. So that's a fun way to hear the woman's voice more than the men's here. And so he's the one who cast the vote. He's the one who's credited with, casting the vote needed for ratification. But it seems like the credit's really being given to his mother as a suffragist. So here's another way that a woman is fighting for women's rights to vote. And it's just slightly different. And she knew that he would make the right choice because from when he was a toddler, he was, what was it?
Staying his state and all that.
Oh yeah, he knew his newest state and he knew the cities. Yeah, right. So he was meant to do this from an early age. Okay, so that's basically what there is to this little lesson idea here. And I would definitely recommend going onto Chronicling America and looking at the newspaper article on this online on the screen. It shows up much better that way. But then you have the letter, which is not at the Library of Congress, but it's from the McClung collection. But you can at least see what it looks like.